Episode 2. The Basket, the Dumpster, and the Truth. When Lisa Dodd and DeAndre Holloway walked into that apartment at 9:11 p.m., no one outside could see what was coming. To the neighbors, arguments in that building weren't unusual. They'd heard them fight before. Loud fights. The kind that made walls shake. The kind that made you pause your TV and look at the ceiling. They had even called the police before because of how violent the disturbances sounded. They didn't know what was being thrown or who was hitting who, but it sounded dangerous enough to make people afraid. And on the night of June 8th, they heard it again. But this time was different. A downstairs neighbor described getting home around 9:30 p.m., and one detail immediately stood out. Lisa's front door was cracked open. That was unusual. They didn't normally leave it like that. And from inside, the neighbor heard muffled yelling. Not just arguing. Not normal yelling. It sounded like someone trying to scream but holding it back, like pain was being forced down, like someone was trying not to be heard. Later, the apartment began shaking. The neighbor assumed they were fighting again. But then the screaming got loud. Really loud. Intense. The kind of screaming that snaps you out of denial. And then came the thuds. 5 or 6 heavy impacts. Each one louder than the last. Each one shaking the downstairs apartment. And as the neighbor tried to describe the sound, one comparison came to mind. It sounded like chopping wood. Not because they were sure what it was, because they weren't, but because of how steady it was. Rhythmic. Like someone lifting something and bringing it down again with force. Over and over. And then it stopped. The screaming stopped. The banging stopped. The shaking stopped. Everything went quiet. At the time, the neighbor couldn't bring themselves to imagine what that sound could mean. But later, police would come to understand what was happening upstairs and why the head was missing. After the sound stopped, the neighbor heard someone go outside briefly, then come back in. They were too scared to look. They didn't want to be seen watching. They didn't want to provoke whoever was up there. They later went outside and waited, expecting that after a fight, someone would come down like they had before. But no one came down. Instead, the lights upstairs kept turning on and off. Someone was moving around. They assumed it was Lisa. They wanted to believe it was Lisa. Then the neighbor texted the landlord, Joe. They told him what they heard. Thumps, screaming, the building shaking. Joe tried to contact Lisa. There was no response. The neighbor said if it started again, they would call the police. But it never started again, because it was already over. Lisa was already dead, and the person who killed her had moved into cleanup mode. The next day, Lisa's mother arrived, found her daughter's body, and called 911. Police began building a timeline fast. CCTV showed Lisa and DeAndre returning home at 9:11 p.m. After that, Lisa was never seen again. DeAndre did not leave again until 11:57 p.m., when he came out carrying the white laundry basket. He approached Lisa's car, but didn't enter it, suggesting he didn't have the keys on him. He went back inside and returned again, still carrying the basket, then walked toward the smoke shop. A business camera later captured the moment the basket was tossed into a dumpster. Inside was Lisa's head. And now the crime scene made a horrifying kind of sense. The head wasn't in the apartment because it had been removed, transported, discarded. Police also learned that within hours of that dumpster drop, Lisa's car disappeared from the parking lot. And DeAndre showed up at his mother's house around 2:30 a.m. He was banging on the door, pacing, acting nervous. Someone inside noticed something else. A black car in the driveway. Lisa drove a black car. So now, DeAndre was at his mother's home with his girlfriend's car, without his girlfriend. That alone raised alarms. But it didn't stop there. DeAndre's family began noticing he had items that didn't belong to him. His grandmother said he gave her Lisa's ID and debit card. He also gave her keys. When she asked why he had them, he didn't really answer. He looked dazed, like his mind wasn't fully present. And that's what made it worse. Because it didn't feel like someone who just had an argument. It felt like someone who had done something irreversible. That morning, PJ saw him in the bathroom cutting off his dreadlocks. He hadn't cut his hair in 2 years. He was proud of it. But now he was cutting it off like he needed to change how he looked. He said it was a fresh start. After showing up in the middle of the night with Lisa's car. Fresh start. While Lisa's family couldn't reach her. Fresh start. While blood and a knife had been found in a dumpster nearby. DeAndre asked to shower and asked for a change of clothes. Afterward, he took his clothing outside and placed it near the trash. Later, those clothes were thrown away. Then DeAndre left the house around midday, saying he was going to cut some grass. He left on foot. And from the outside, it looked like he was trying to erase himself. Change appearance. Discard clothes. Get rid of evidence. Separate himself from the crime scene. As police pieced together what happened, they started moving quickly. That night, around 9:30 p.m. on June 9th, police executed a search warrant at DeAndre's mother's house. In the trash can outside, they found exactly what they expected to find. Discarded clothing matching what DeAndre wore on CCTV. And his cut-off dreadlocks wrapped in toilet paper. But DeAndre was gone. Police prepared for a manhunt. Then, early the next morning, they got a call from Gillespie, Illinois Police Department. They had taken a John Doe into custody. A man who refused to give his name. A man acting restless and manic. A man they later recognized as DeAndre Holloway. He had been arrested on a cannabis-related charge. And in custody, DeAndre was pacing, repeatedly challenging officers, speaking like someone trying to control the room, even while handcuffed. At one point, he laughed. Then he started banging his head against the wall. Officers had to restrain him to stop him from hurting himself. He still wouldn't give his name. It didn't matter. Alton investigators arrived and arrested him as a suspect in Lisa's murder. They carried out warrants for DNA, fingerprints, and other samples. Then, nearly 24 hours after Lisa's body was discovered, they attempted to interview him. But DeAndre refused to talk. He wouldn't even confirm his name. He kept saying he needed to go to work. He mentioned dissociation. He said he'd been prescribed medication once. Then he asked for a lawyer. The interview ended. On June 13th, DeAndre Holloway was charged with multiple crimes, including 2 counts of first-degree murder and charges connected to the death of the unborn child, concealment, and additional offenses connected to the vehicle and evidence. Bond was set at $2 million. The case hit Alton hard. Even police officials spoke publicly about how unbelievable and horrific it was. A young woman, 8 months pregnant, killed in a way that didn't just end life. It violated it. It left shock behind like debris. DeAndre's family stepped forward too, asking the public to consider the nuance of his mental state. His stepfather spoke publicly, offering condolences to Lisa's family while calling the act what it was: evil. He said the family had tried for years to get DeAndre help. He said the system wouldn't allow long-term mental care unless someone had already done something. He described it as a failure, people with mental illness being left on their own until tragedy forces everyone to pay attention. But even in that statement, he made something clear. He wasn't excusing what DeAndre did. He wasn't arguing DeAndre should ever be safe to return to society. He was saying it was tragic. Tragic for Lisa, tragic for the baby, and tragic that help didn't come before it was too late. Inside jail, DeAndre's behavior reportedly continued to be unstable. He made threats to corrections officers. He refused to come out of his cell. He refused a virtual court appearance, and officers forcibly restrained him to bring him in. Eventually, he was found mentally unfit to stand trial and placed into treatment until competency could be restored. As the case moved forward, legal issues impacted sentencing considerations, including rulings about how the unborn child could be counted under certain sentencing standards. But the core truth didn't change. Lisa was dead. Her baby was dead. And the evidence trail led back to DeAndre. In January 2024, DeAndre entered a guilty plea. And on January 17, 2025, he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. The sentence was structured across multiple charges to be served consecutively. He would have to serve decades before even becoming eligible for release. And still, one question remained suspended in the air like smoke. Why? There were theories. Maybe jealousy. Maybe the stress of a collapsing relationship. Maybe escalating violence that finally went too far. Maybe mental illness mixed with substance use and rage. But the truth is, the exact reason was never fully spoken by DeAndre himself. Lisa's family, meanwhile, stood in grief that no courtroom victory can erase. After sentencing, Lisa's mother spoke about what this really was. A tragic outcome of an on and off domestic violence relationship that did not have to end this way. She warned others. If you're being abused emotionally, mentally, physically, make a safe plan to leave. If someone threatens your life, believe them. If you have mental illness, seek treatment and stay consistent. Because mental illness does not remove accountability, and abuse does not improve by itself. Lisa should have been raising her child. Instead, she became another name added to a list of lives lost to domestic violence. And as the case closed, Lisa's mother shared words meant to land like a final lesson, not just a memorial. Because what happened to Lisa was not sudden. It was not random. It was built in the pattern. The bruises, the black eyes, the control, the fights that people heard and got used to, the violence that became normal until it became fatal. Lisa was 22, 8 months pregnant, still trying to figure out her future, still texting her mother late at night with fear in her chest, still hoping things could be fixed. The last message she sent said it all. I'm trying to figure it out. And then she walked back into that apartment. And she never walked out again. In the end, Lisa's life was taken. Her baby's life was taken. And the evidence of what happened was carried out in a white laundry basket and dumped like trash. A detail so horrifying it feels unreal. But it's real. And that's why stories like Lisa's matter. Because behind the headlines, there's always a pattern. And if someone listening to this recognizes that pattern in their own life, in a friend's life, in a sister's life, don't ignore it. Don't wait for it to become louder. Because sometimes the screaming stops. And by the time it does, it's already too late.